Kia ora. Hello. This week we are going to continue our Life in the Medieval Cities series on medieval crime and violence. This week we are going to have a look at how medieval people in the cities policed violence. And when I say policed, what I mean is try to control. If you caught our last video in the series, you would have seen that medieval towns were not as lawless as once thought. If you did not catch that one, pop over and have a bit of a look. As usual, all links are down below. Medieval Europe did not have a police system like we do today. Policing was reliant on a communal approach. This relied on the community and the feudal system to operate together. To understand this, we need to understand how medieval law operated just a little bit. Guilt is automatically assumed if one is accused of a crime. It is only after you are arrested that you can prove your innocence through a trial. The community also relied on the idea of Fama. This was what was said about a person or an event. Fama can also refer to a person's reputation. If someone had bad or poor reputation, or if they were a stranger, they were subject of distrust within the community. These people often were the victims of harsher penalties or the target of specific laws. So how did the medieval people police their communities? The idea of the King's Guard that we see in movies riding into town to arrest the villain, therefore acting as a police force, is a modern concept applied to modern ideas. Instead, people of a town were responsible for the safety of the town, village, or borough. The people within this town were sworn to report any crime and do their best to apprehend the criminal. Failure to do so would mean those witness to the crime were also guilty. On the witnessing of this crime, the hue and cry must go forth that a crime was committed and a posse comitatus must be formed to apprehend the culprit. They are then arrested and handed over to the bailiff or sheriff or reeve, who would then hold the culprit until trial. If the culprit fled to another town, the posse would then follow them to that town and the hue and cry would go forth, and everyone in that town was also required to apprehend the criminal. Assuming that person is caught and held for trial, otherwise we would have this Benny Hill style chase scene all over the moors. Wait, did I just show my age? I think I did. Well, look, just fill in whatever appropriate analogy that would suit. I don't know. I really don't watch stuff. If the person is not captured or is held on bail and fails to attend court, they are outlawed. This means the sheriff can seize their property, lands, and arrest them on sight. Outlaws can always repeal the sentence by attending court and pleading. This was all held in place by the swearing of oaths to each other and the town, and in the case of England, the borough would then swear an oath to the king. In Germany, this was known as the Pax Jurata. Due to the increased size of the cities, there was more chance for disorder. This led to the statutes being enacted to try to lead to the security of the cities. While they did not have police forces, medieval cities did have standing militias. There was evidence of watchmen in the Assize of Arms, written in 1252, and it was written, by the order of the King of England, the Winchester Act mandating the watch. Part 4. And the King commandeth that from henceforth all watches be made, that it hath been used in past times, that was to wit from the day of Ascension unto the day of St. Michael, in every city by 6 men at every gate, in every borough by 12 men, in every town by 6 or 4, according to the number of inhabitants of the town. They shall keep the watch all night from sun setting unto sun rising, and if any stranger do pass them, that he shall be arrested until morning, and if no suspicion be found, he shall go quit. Cities tried to limit the populace from moving around at night. This is when most crimes would occur. At sunset, a bell would sound. This was curfew. The origin of the word curfew is from Old French, meaning to cover fire. All fires were to be put out and everyone was to be in bed. During the early 14th century, Ghent had about 42 sergeants and fellows, along with a guild of watchmen to provide night watch outside of wartime. Paris, on the other hand, had about 200 sergeants in the early 14th century. This was counted at 400 foot and horse by 1400. Many statutes have people being detained until morning. If they are moving around at night, then to be released in the morning on surety being presented to the sheriff. We can then look to the Statute of Winchester, 1285, that no man do lodge in the suburbs, nor the edges of town, except in the daytime, nor yet in the daytime, unless his host will answer for him. And the bailiff of town every week, or at least every 15th day, shall make inquiry of all persons being lodged in the suburbs or the edges of towns, and if they do find any that have received or lodged in any other way, of whom they may be suspicious that they are against the peace, the bailiffs shall do right therein. We can also see in the Statutes of Cologne, written in the 1340s, provided that if anyone by night or day, whether local or stranger, takes it upon himself to seize or strike anyone, or get surety from anyone, or to commit rape or force in the city of Cologne, whoever become aware of it is to run quickly with loud noise, break open his door, and enter and hold that person who has done these deeds there. The other concern that medieval city dwellers had was strangers. Medieval society, as I have mentioned like 1,000 times before, was built on oaths. Medieval cities did their best to try to restrict the movement of strangers. This was difficult, as cities were places of trade and itinerant workers were common. Tavern and innkeepers were often required to take the names of people staying at their establishment. If their guests should commit a crime, then the innkeeper had a responsibility to report them. Medieval towns also tried to limit the size of social gatherings. Rowdy weddings, funerals, and baptisms were limited in cost or number of guests. Nuremberg was particularly strict. It banned public weddings. There was to be no more eating and dancing at day or night. A man or woman may invite guests 2 weeks later to the wedding. The wedding party was limited to 6 men and 6 women, including those accompanying the groom and the bride to the church. There was also to be no more than 8 guests at a baptism in addition to the parents. Oh boy, sounds like an introvert's dream. What medieval towns and cities are trying to do is keep the peace. This is an important process for a medieval person, where violence is not just an act as we see it today, it is also a performative action. Violence has a restorative role in medieval society. For medieval people, peace is often kept by the peace of the feud. Violence does not escalate due to the complex series of oaths and bonds that are sworn by parties to protect each other. Should one party harm another, then they are honor bound to seek restoration. This can be in the form of violence. It is then on those around them to ensure that the peace is kept. To avoid disturbance, life and order is kept. As discussed in our last video on the subject, most people carried at least a knife, and in England, we can see in the Assize of Arms, required people to own weapons in readiness of war and to keep the peace. Some towns did ban the carrying of weapons, or ban the carrying of concealed weapons, or limit their wearing. However, as a whole, medieval towns did not ban the use or carry of weapons. Often people would have a knife or a long knife. The goal was to ensure the peace was kept, as people were responsible to keep the peace if a crime was committed, or should violence break out, it was up to the bystanders to calm the situation and keep the peace. These attempts were not always successful, as we would see them today, where we would expect a non-violent resolution to an arrest. For example, in a letter of pardon, we hear of Hugues Brochet. The hue and cry was raised, and he was alerted by some of his friends that his son was being beaten. When he and his friends arrived to where his son was being beaten, Cochon, a teenage boy, ran at Hugues with sword drawn and accused Hugues of denying God, a great insult to Hugues' honor. Hugues Brochet said that was not true, and it gave him great displeasure. Cochon continued to argue and approached with his sword. Hugues was attempting to de-escalate the situation, but Cochon did not stop being aggressive. Huguet and his friend Nuron had clubs that they used to beat Cochon. Huguet hit him twice in the head, and Nuron hit him in the nape of the neck and the head. The defenders took the sword away from Cochon so he could not use it against Huguet. There was no visible harm done to Cochon, and he went home, but the next day he died. Huguet was pardoned for justifiable homicide. The aggressor has acted in a manner that was violent. The defender has used violence to police violence acts against himself and his son. Cochon was not only attacking his son, but he used violent language and attacked Huguet's honor. It's through this activity that society was maintained, such as it is until the 16th and 17th centuries, where the state begins to tighten the monopoly of violence and remove it from the hands of the individuals and place it squarely in the hands of the monarchy. It's from this movement of violence from the community to the state and making policing the responsibility of the state that we see the development of the modern police forces in the 18th century. Of course, that's another topic altogether, and I don't cover the 18th century, so you'll have to find that information in another video with someone else. Next part of the series, we'll discuss medieval courts and punishments and how that was carried out.
Hello? Oh, you're still here. That must mean you're at the end of the video. So, I guess you'll probably want to like and subscribe. Also, remember to stay safe, have fun, and keep reenacting.